I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. I don't know if everybody has met Hannah, but Hannah Van Nemwagen is a senior comprehensive planner at the City of Colorado Springs, and she's going to talk today about accessory dwelling units. It's been a hot topic for a long, long time. A series of ordinances passed that have written ADU regulation into law. So Hannah's going to talk to the nuts and bolts of the new ordinances. So Hannah, please take it away.
Great, thank you. So yeah, the ADU ordinances have been worked on since basically 2016, I want to say. 2016 is when we started doing some research on what accessory dwelling units in other cities were doing and what that could mean in Colorado Springs, but we didn't really get the formal go-ahead to start writing language until 2018. And so 2018 really kicked off the writing of draft language and the meeting with public stakeholders and public groups. And then 2019 was a lot of discussion with the City Council, which led to final adoption in mid-2020 with implementation on July 6th. So the language is still pretty new. When I double checked this afternoon, so far, no accessory dwelling unit building permits have been pulled under the new language, but we have had a number of what we're calling pre-application meetings, which means a individual who owns a property has come into the planning department or talked with a planner over the phone to see how they could construct one of these units on their property. So we have had a number of these early meetings, but not a whole lot of building permits being pulled as of yet. Granted, we're only about a month into this, so that's not totally surprising. But we'll see how many of these actual pre-applications turn into building permits. We are tracking all of this, and we'll have metrics to report out on when we have a solid length of time to actually take a look at stuff. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through a presentation. The presentation itself is, largely, okay, sorry, I have two screens going, so I need to get the right screen on the right. Oh my gosh, this worked just a second ago. Of course, it's swapped screens on me. Okay, I think you guys are seeing the correct screen now. Are you guys seeing the presentation screen and not my notes screen? Okay, great. So the presentation that I have prepared for you guys today is largely going over the specifics of the ordinance itself and not necessarily the goals and high-level concepts and ideas, but actually what the language is telling us. So like Rich mentioned, Hannah Van Nemwagen with the City of Colorado Springs in the planning department. I've worked in the planning department for the city for about 5 years or just over 5 years now, but I've been in the field of city planning for closer to 10, working down in the Phoenix area. So as we go through the presentation here, there's some terms that I will be using, and these will kind of prime our discussion. So when I say the term one dwelling unit, I mean one family. So one dwelling unit can hold one family. And what I mean by one family is I mean our code-defined term of family. So the City of Colorado Springs zoning code does define what a family is when we're talking about how many individuals can live within a dwelling unit. And that definition is really any number of related persons, not to exceed health code or safety code requirements, which this planning department doesn't enforce, but any number of actually related persons, that's blood or by marriage, and up to 5 unrelated individuals. So that can be a married couple who is renting part of their home out to 3 college students, or a single person renting out to a family of 4. Any combination of 5 unrelated people is also considered one family in the zoning code. So that definition of family was established in 1973, I want to say. So it has been around for a little while. That has not changed with our ADU code update. So when I also say affidavits and covenants, what I mean is an affidavit is an acknowledgement of a requirement, and a covenant, different from an HOA covenant, but a city covenant is a promise to do or not do something in the future. So we are proposing, or I need to get used to, we are not proposing, 3 types have been established, and that is the accessory family suite, the integrated accessory dwelling unit, and the detached accessory dwelling unit. So an accessory family suite is different from what we're referring to as an ADU. So an accessory family suite is permitted by right in all districts, all zone districts, where a single family detached home is permitted, including PUD for single family detached. An accessory family suite is meant for one family. So again, a single family home right now allows one family, one dwelling unit, one family. And the addition of an accessory family suite is essentially allowing a homeowner to have 2 kitchens. So previously, our definition of a dwelling unit meant that you could only have 1 full kitchen. And so now we have adjusted that definition to now allow 2 full kitchens within one home. However, no matter however the home is made up, however the 2 kitchen situation works out, only one family can occupy the entire property under this allowance for an accessory family suite. So in theory, we are not increasing the number of individuals who would reside on a property than was previously allowed. We frequently refer to this ordinance as the 2 kitchen ordinance, because really we're just now allowing people to have 2 kitchens in their home. So a step up from an accessory family suite is an integrated accessory dwelling unit. An accessory dwelling unit is 2 units, so that allows 2 families. So again, any number of related individuals, but no more than 10 unrelated individuals can occupy the property. An integrated ADU has to be attached to the principal structure. So essentially an attached secondary unit does not exist in, or this concept of an integrated ADU does not exist in 2-family and multifamily zone districts, because essentially then it's a duplex. And then detached ADUs are already permitted in 2-family and multifamily zone districts, and they will continue to be allowed there. Really, the ordinances just allowed a different development standards. It's still the same picture, but now the setbacks are different, stuff like that. So to dive into those more specifically, accessory family suites used to be called just extra living space or fake ADU, and they're now being called accessory family suite. So under the old code, people could kind of skirt the 2 kitchen situation by not having a 220 volt outlet or a gas connection in their kitchen, but still rent out a space to individuals as long as they weren't exceeding that definition of a family. So we are getting rid of this loophole essentially by permitting it in code under what we're calling an accessory family suite. But now there are limitations and restrictions that we've established through this ordinance. So like I mentioned, you can have a 2nd full kitchen. It may only exist as an integrated space within the principal structure or a building addition to the principal structure. It cannot be a part of a detached structure. City Council was very adamant that in single family zone districts, detached units or detached accessory family suites are not going to be a thing. So when we talk about accessory family suites, think that they are only a part of that principal structure, only a portion of that structure. And a principal structure and the accessory family suite must maintain an internal connection between the two units, or between the two spaces. So that internal connection can be a hallway, it can be a doorway, but that connection point must exist. And again, no more than one family can occupy the entire property if an accessory family suite is established. So that would carry forward from today. If you are building an accessory family suite, we are requiring a signed, notarized, and recorded affidavit acknowledging those occupancy limitations. And we are also requiring a restricted covenant prohibiting the separate subdivision and sale of the unit from the primary structure. So like I mentioned, an affidavit is an acknowledgement of a requirement. So the property owner would be recording this affidavit acknowledging that they know that no more than 5 individuals can occupy this property. And then the covenant is a restriction that would go on the deed of sale and carry forward to future property owners, not permitting the condoization of the unit or the family suite to be sold to a separate property owner. They may only be sold as a package, and that's what the covenant is intended to do. So a common term that tips us off for whether somebody's hoping to build, or for somebody who's hoping to build an accessory family suite, is my mother-in-law needs to move in with us, my grandma needs to move in with us, whoever who's related. These will be probably the most common instances of accessory family suite. And so for us as planners, we ask the following questions and provide the following information. What's the zone district, and is a single family detached home permitted by right? If yes, then you can have this family suite. We must notify the applicant of the occupancy limitation and the prohibition against separate sale and subdivision, and then provide the applicant with the affidavit and the covenant. We must notify the applicant that the family suite has to be integrated to the main home, absolutely no detached structures. If all of these standards are being met, they may move straight forward into a building permit. So at the building permit stage is when they would provide those signed, recorded, and notarized affidavits and covenants. And our development review enterprise will deny any building permit that is missing these documents or if they aren't complete. As far as development standards, an accessory family suite may be up to half the floor area of the principal structure. A building addition, if they are choosing to go through the building addition route, they cannot exceed the height that is currently allowed in the zone district. And sorry, there's flies in my office and I don't know how. So the addition must be architecturally compatible and shall not involve design modifications to the exterior of the principal structure that indicates their presence from the front of the structure. And really that's a fancy way, or a lawyer's way, or city attorney's way of saying that you can't have 2 front doors. So if you're building this accessory family suite, the door, if you have an exterior access point, cannot be located on the front of the structure. It has to be located to the side or to the rear of the structure. There is no requirement to build an exterior access point. If you want the primary access point to be through the main home, that is fine. But if you're choosing to have this secondary access, it just can't be from the front. Mostly we're trying to steer away from that typical duplex look in single family zones. So similarly, if you have a upper floor unit, whether that's a converted attic or a unit on the second floor, you can't have that true fire escape look. It has to be an exterior stairwell from an actual deck. So not just like a landing and some stairs, which wouldn't be typical on a single family home. It has to be from an actual 2nd story deck. If you have an exterior access, you have to have a 36-inch wide clear access path from the front of the structure. And that's really just to assist the fire department in finding the unit's exterior access. The clear access path does not need to be an actual sidewalk. It doesn't need to be really indicated. Really what we mean by clear access is that it can't be blocked by vegetation, but it can have a gate. The fire department told us that they can get over any fence, they can get through any gate, but they really struggle to work their way through overgrown trees and shrubs. So that was written into the code as an assistance to them. And then if you are building an accessory family suite, you do have to provide one off-street parking space in addition to what your single family home already provides. So moving on to, well, let me check the chat, make sure I'm not missing any questions. Okay, it's not pulling up, so I guess we'll wait till the end. So integrated accessory dwelling units are a step up from accessory family suites, meaning that you are now allowed to have 2 families occupying the property, so up to 10 total unrelated individuals. Like an accessory family suite, you can have that second kitchen. It's essentially a true second unit within the main home or a building addition. Again, integrated intent meaning that it is supposed to be attached or a building addition. But one of the key differences, besides the number of individuals, is that it does not require that internal connection point. So you can have true units that are not dependent on each other at all, that don't share any spaces, basically. And again, allows 2 families to occupy the property. In order to have an integrated accessory dwelling unit in a single family zone, the City Planning Commission has to approve a conditional use. And so a conditional use is a major application through the City Planning Department, which requires a public notice upon the application submittal. Public notice generally entails a sign in the front yard as well as postcards to be mailed to all property owners within 500 feet at the very least. We do a 28-day review. We gather public comments from there. If they decide to go forward with a public hearing, then we recreate that public notification process with another poster and more postcards indicating the hearing's location, date, or time. For the foreseeable future, those will all be virtual meetings, but those postcards and the poster will have that information on them. And then the City Planning Commission has to find that it meets the conditional use review criteria. And with each public hearing, the public does have an opportunity to comment on the applications. So if they go through that whole process, generally it takes about 2.5 to 3 months. Can take less time, it can take more time, that's just pretty average. But if they go through that whole process and they get approval from the Planning Commission, then they're able to move forward with their building permit. So with the integrated accessory dwelling unit, if they get approval from the City Planning Commission, the property owner occupancy requirement does kick in. So the property owner occupancy requirement was proposed with short-term rentals, and we are just using that same definition. And that definition reads that the property owner must actually occupy one of those 2 units, whether that's the principal unit or the ADU, for at least 185 days of the year. Now, we did also propose a waiver to the owner occupancy limitation or owner occupancy requirement for some circumstances that are out of people's control. So some common examples that we expect to see are if somebody is active duty military and they receive temporary orders to report to a different base out of state, or just something that requires active duty military to leave their home for a period of time. The waiver is really written for that situation. Also, it can be used if you have a health condition which requires medical treatment out of state or far away, and you just have to go reside near these specialty services that requires you to vacate your home for a period of time. The waiver also allows for situations like that. So the integrated accessory dwelling unit, you get approval from CPC, you have the owner occupancy requirement, and you have 2 restrictive covenants that also need to be signed, notarized, and recorded with your building permit, similar to the family suite. So these are actual restrictive covenants. One, like I mentioned previously, prohibiting subdivision and sale, separate subdivision and sale. So the property owner can't just condo the unit and sell it off separately. And 2, assuring the property owner occupancy. So both of these covenants would be recorded against the property's title and would apply to future property owners. So a phrase that we're expecting to hear indicating that somebody is wanting to build an integrated accessory dwelling unit is if they had a family suite and their mother-in-law passed away, or they no longer need the family suite, but they have this space or something along those lines, this is an option for them to continue to use the integrated accessory dwelling unit. So again, they could still use the family suite as long as they weren't exceeding that family definition. But if for some reason they just can't meet that definition and they need to use the space for something, that's where this really comes into play, the integrated ADU. So again, we would remind them of that family definition. Even if the person's unrelated, they may still be able to rent out the space. If they're exceeding that family definition, they have to apply for the conditional use for an integrated accessory dwelling unit. We must notify the applicant of the property owner occupancy requirement and the potential waiver process if they might fit into any of those categories, and provide the property owner with those covenants pretty early in the process so that they can read them, be aware of them, sign, notarize, and record them. And then also, not that this is something that city planning would regulate, but that the Pikes Peak Regional Building Department regulates, is that when you are building a second full unit, not a family suite, but this second full unit, both the principal structure and the accessory dwelling unit have to be fire rated along their shared common wall. So that can mean a relatively significant retrofit of existing single family homes to build those fire rated assemblies along the shared wall within that single family home. So we definitely will be directing them to talk to the regional building department before they get too far. Development standards for integrated ADUs. The minimum lot size is just going to be the same minimum lot size for a single family home. Like the accessory family suite, it can go up to half the floor area of the principal structure. If they're doing a building addition, the height is just the same as the principal structure in the zone district. And any building additions must be architecturally compatible, like I previously discussed. Again, an integrated ADU may have a separate exterior access, but it has to still be located to the side or to the rear. And if you are doing exterior stairs, it does have to be from a deck versus just a landing and then stairway. Again, the 36-inch clear access path, and still requiring one off-street parking space for the unit. So same development standards as the accessory family suite. Okay, moving on to detached ADUs. So detached ADUs are not permitted in single family zones. When we first wrote the ordinances, or the first iteration of the ordinances, they did ask for detached single family or detached units in single family zones. However, that I cannot exaggerate how hard that crashed and burned. Nobody was particularly interested in that. We definitely heard the public loud and clear, and we definitely heard city council loud and clear that nobody was interested in allowing that, and that is, we get it, that's fine. So we carried that forward to the new ordinances, detached ADUs not in single family zones. So for the 2-family and multifamily zones, we did adjust the development standards, and these recommendations, or what ultimately became code, came out of a accessory dwelling unit steering committee that we put together in 2018. And that steering committee was made up of a couple of decision makers, so a member of City Planning Commission, member of City Council, a bunch of practitioners, so general contractors, architects, people who are consultants on this type of construction type, and we had just a general couple of property owners who had recently built ADUs, with the goal of telling us what wasn't working in the code. And so that's where we got these new development standards for detached ADUs. So those new standards are reducing the minimum lot size to the same as the single family home in the zone district. And then also allowing a detached accessory dwelling unit to basically a larger unit. So previously, regardless of how large your home was or how large your lot was, there was a cap of a 750 square foot unit. Now it's more proportional to the principal structure. So 50% the floor area of the principal structure, but not to exceed 1,250 square feet, regardless of how large your structure is. However, if you are building, or if your principal home is 1,500 square feet or less, you will maintain a minimum right to build of 750 square feet. So if you have 1,000-foot principal structure, we're not going to make you or cap you at 500 square feet. You would be allowed to build a 750 square foot unit, just as you previously were. However, one key component that's important to remember is that the entire accessory structure, whether it's above a garage or a standalone unit, cannot exceed the gross floor area of your principal home. So if your principal home is only 1,000 square feet, while you do have the ability to build a 750 square foot unit, you're not going to be able to put it above a 750 square foot garage for an accessory structure total of around 15 or 1,500 square feet. That would then make a larger accessory structure than your principal structure. So again, the total size of your structure does still count, but we did establish a minimum right to build and a cap of 1,250. So we did also increase the potential height of an accessory dwelling unit, a detached unit. Previously, regardless of your roof pitch, it was capped at 25 feet. But now if you are doing a 612 roof pitch or steeper, then you can go up to 28 feet. But if it's shallower than 612, then you're still capped at 25. So really this is to facilitate steeper roof pitches, which we kept hearing were more desirable. And then a couple of contractors told us there was a practical application to allowing 3 additional feet with like a standard length of piece of wood or something. So we did take that recommendation and put it into the code. And the setbacks have actually stayed the same. They're the same as an accessory structure. And you can now locate a detached ADU in front of the principal structure if you had a principal structure that was set really far back on the lot. And now we have also scrapped the 20-foot separation requirement that existed in the code prior to the new code. So if you had run into that requirement, that is now scrapped. So moving on. So this is a general look at that process that I had outlined a little earlier. So everything starts with a pre-application meeting with a planner. There's no fee for this meeting. It really is just an informational, informal sit down with somebody who can tell you what the code requires. So that would be the beginning. From there, after you understand all the requirements, and if you choose to move forward, that's the application stage. So that would be the conditional use process. Again, like I mentioned, a 28-day review with public notice. Then we move on to the public hearing with City Planning Commission with, again, public notice. And then moving forward to the building permit submittal, where they talk to the Pikes Peak Regional Building Department, as well as our development review enterprise. And the enterprise would check for those required affidavits and covenants. So this is an example of what the affidavit and the covenants look like. This is just the example of the restrictive covenant prohibiting subdivision and separate sale. But the other 2 documents look very similar to this. We do have, this is now the city template for these, so we would not accept any alternatives. So anybody who wanted to draft their own language, that won't work. They have to use this template. This will eventually be uploaded to the website for people to download as well. And lastly, we did establish the accessory dwelling unit overlay zone. So the ADU overlay really would be used in conjunction with new residential development. There was some concern from City Council about whether there were, let's just say as an example, there were a group of homeowners who, we'll say 10 homeowners in a neighborhood, and they were all interested in building an accessory dwelling unit. Could they then ask the city to rezone their property to add this ADU overlay? And we felt it was most appropriate to have each individual homeowner go through the conditional use process so that it can be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So we really wrote it to only be used in conjunction with new residential development with parcels of land that are at least 10 acres in size. And those parcels all have to be contiguous and they all have to be under the same ownership. So we did write in a couple of caveats. So a smaller district may be considered if they are surrounded by, or if this parcel is surrounded by very clear and identifiable boundaries, whether that's collector or larger roadways, railroad, greenways, or an open space of some kind of park, or if it's adjacent to a multifamily or commercial zone district. But in no instance can an ADU overlay be less than 3 acres. And we picked 3 acres because that is the standard size of a city block in downtown and in Old Colorado City. It is we're estimating that it is very, very unlikely that one person will come in and buy up an entire city block in downtown and in OCC. But let's just say that that potentially happened. They would be allowed to do that, but that would require a total scraping of the property of those lots, replatting into one lot, and it all be under the same ownership. So those are some relatively large hurdles, but just in case somebody ever pulled that off, it would be allowed to be rezoned to an ADU overlay, again with a very lengthy public process that is entailed with rezoning a property. So with the ADU overlay, which we're thinking again with probably happen more to the north and to the east, where a lot of those new large subdivisions are happening, if they did the ADU overlay, then they would meet the same requirements. They would meet all accessory dwelling unit requirements unless they were otherwise established in the PUD. So they wouldn't be required to do the owner occupancy affidavit or the owner occupancy requirement. They wouldn't be held to the one family rule because the property would be initially zoned to allow these units. But again, a PUD can always be more restrictive as well. Okay, so with that, I do have some contact information here. So if you have questions about a specific address, and I can definitely forward this information along, but if you have questions about either constructing one of these units or you're not sure if your neighbor's doing something right or whatever, if you have questions about a specific address, I definitely recommend contacting our department's front counter, and we have 2 front counters, and those are the phone numbers. You generally would get a quicker response calling the front counter than from me about specific addresses, just because they are dedicated people who are answering the phones. But if you have questions about specific language in the ADU ordinances, please contact me. So I do have my phone number and my email address. Or if you're interested in looking into this for yourself, you can start with that pre-application meeting, and you can submit that request online. All pre-app meetings are happening virtually. Generally speaking, once you submit the request, you should be hearing a response within 2 or 3 business days. So it's usually a pretty quick turnaround. And with that, I think we can turn it over to questions.
Great. So if